What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to take a break from all new, all different Marvel here for a little bit, probably for about the next week or so, and just because of the fact that there's some older stories that I really want to cover, and I feel like having one day a week with Spider-Man is cool, but Spider-Man dominates that entire thing. So as you guys will have noticed, we did Superior Spider-Man Goblin Nation, and we're going to take a break from that for a second. We'll come back to it, but we're going to take a break for a second, and I want to kind of focus on Iron Man Extremis, or Extremis, depending on how you choose to pronounce it, because as far as I'm concerned, you know, Warren Ellis' story here is probably the greatest Iron Man story ever written. It's pretty stellar in terms of how it unfolds. But the funny thing about this is that this is what Marvel does instead of reboots. Marvel doesn't really like reboot in the traditional sense. Instead, they give us stories like Iron Man Extremis. And what I mean here is this story basically coincides with the Marvel Cinematic Universe planning the phase, or really planning the release of the Iron Man film. And it's kind of funny because in this story, it really just kind of retcons a lot of Iron Man history, really kind of teaches it, treats it like it's brand new. And it was designed to be that way. There was an interview that Warren Ellis did with comicbook.com, I think it was, where he had basically talked about when he went to go write this story, he didn't read anything about Iron Man before this, maybe a handful of things like his origin story, and that was really about it. For the most part, this is an Iron Man story for a new generation of readers by a guy who just didn't worry about any of the previous Iron Man stuff. So the cool thing about this is that Extremis goes into Execute Program, and then Civil War, and then maybe like one or two stories after Civil War. I think it's Iron Man Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then you get into like Matt Fraction and Kieran Gillen's runs, which are amazing. God, they are so good for Iron Man. But this basically sets the stage for everything about Tony Stark going into the Civil War and post-Civil War landscape. So the cool thing about this is, in a lot of ways, you will see signs of Iron Man 3 in this story. And while Iron Man 3 was not necessarily the best Iron Man film by any standard of measurement, Extremis is an amazing story. So, so initially, we just kind of pick up with this guy named Malin who's ingesting this Extremis formula. And the way it's done is that it's basically done through inoculation, which is to say a direct shot into the bloodstream. And so, of course, once he begins undergoing this process, the physical appearance or the physical changes are violent in the sense that there's blood vomiting, there's all kinds of physical appearances of the skin, so on and so forth. And it's really kind of cool because a person who ingests Extremis goes into what amounts to more or less a larval phase where they basically form a cocoon around themselves and then they re-emerge as something new entirely. Now, it's kind of interesting because Warren Ellis is borrowing a little bit of the Inhuman process, right? Like the Inhuman concept. With the Inhumans, a person is exposed to the Terrigen Mist, they go into a cocoon, and then they basically re-emerge as the being that we think of them as, or at least that was the traditional scene. There's also been instances, like if you go and read Inhumans Volume 2, for example, they'll just simply go in, they'll be immersed in gas, and they'll just metamorph. So it's been depicted different ways over the years, but what we end up doing here is we actually end up transitioning away to a guy by the name of Dr. Killian. Now, this is kind of funny because in Iron Man 3, Dr. Killian had a far more significant role in the film than he did in this particular story. In this story, like, he's basically typing out a confession about how the Extremis virus had been released. It seems like he's the one that did it, and then he shoots himself, and that's the end of him, and we never see him again. And so it's really kind of crazy to see such stark differences. But the way that this is done, really the way the story is done, I almost kind of wish Iron Man 3 had followed suit with this story because it was groundbreaking in terms of the way it was done. But the fact remains here that we basically pick up with the introduction of Maya Henson. Now, Maya Henson is really going to be one of the main characters in this story alongside Tony Stark, but Killian basically typing out a confession more or less leads to the revelation that he released the Extremis virus out into the general public, which resulted in this particular guy, Malin, getting the virus and then going forward doing whatever it is that he does. Now, again, we still don't know the full impacts of everything that's going on. All we simply know is that a person who ingests this virus gains some measure of abilities. But at this point, we switch over to a meeting that Tony Stark is having with a guy by the name of John Pillinger. Now, John Pillinger is really just kind of a reporter, but he's involved in yellow journalism, which is to say he's involved in the goal of basically uncovering seedy information and then bringing that seedy information to light. And so because of that, he's working with Tony Stark. And the idea here is that Warren Ellis is really just kind of focusing on giving the new reader an understanding of what Tony Stark is about. Because remember, this is just designed to be a jumping off point. And so what we really get here is this explanation on the history of Stark Industries. It's not wildly complicated. It's not extremely long and drawn out. It's pretty to the point. More or less what we're told here is that Stark Industries initially gained its success by being a weapons manufacturer, by gaining contracts from the US government and get involved in the military-industrial complex. The result is that yes, Stark Industries has made a lot of different weapons that have been used in the idea of conflict, and yes, John Pillinger is really kind of looking at this and saying, you are inherently a weapons manufacturer. The Iron Man suit was made by, you know, presumably Stark Industries. The Iron Man suit is by definition a weapon because that's what you guys make. Now, the counter argument that Tony Stark makes here is that no, that's not the case. The Stark Industries has made weapons in the past, but the goal is to essentially turn over a new leaf. The goal is to effectively create a new legacy for Stark International, for Stark Industries, and in turn, find a way to make the world a better place. And so what this does is it really kind of updates the origin of Tony Stark in a lot of different ways. Back when Tony Stark first appeared in Marvel Comics in the 1960s, he was a guy that was rooted in the Vietnam War. And in fact, a lot of stories that were coming up in the 60s tied into the Vietnam War in a lot of different ways. But with Tony Stark, he was designed to be in the military-industrial complex. And so it made sense that he was going to be a guy who would basically be making weapons for the US military. And the result is that some of these mines had basically fallen loose out of a crate, one of them had detonated, and it exploded, resulting in Tony Stark receiving shrapnel in his chest. Now, this is markedly different from the origin that we're used to in the films, and that's why there's give and take. That's why there's a little bit of kind of going back and forth. The comics in some ways maintain their own autonomy in the sense that they are not directly influenced by the movies. Now, recently that's changed. There was an interview that the head guy, Axel Alonso, did with Newsarama, I think, where he said that the goal was to basically bring the comics more in line with the movies to create some identifiable pieces for people who are getting into the comics because of the movies. But again, the comics themselves really still maintain their own autonomy to a degree. And so as this interview begins to wrap up, where John Pillinger had more or less tried to draw this conclusion that despite Tony Stark's best efforts, everything he's done has made him a weapons manufacturer. That's what he is, and that's what he always will be. He poses the question to John, you've been doing this for all this time, but you've never actually changed anything. You know, you're a person that just says, hey, there's a problem over there, and then just doesn't do anything to fix it because it's too inconvenient or because he just doesn't have the power to do it. If you think that you've actually done something, then what is it? What have you changed? How have you made the world a better place? And that's really the question that John can't answer. And so the point that Tony Stark is hitting home here is that, you know, you're one of those folks out there who's just kind of like, hey, there's an issue, and then now it's somebody else's responsibility to take care of it. You know, raising awareness, that kind of a thing. I mean, raising awareness only matters if people don't know about it. Otherwise, you're just a lazy activist. And so because of that, it's really kind of one of these funny scenarios, you know, where it's sort of turning the tables on a reporter. But switching back over to Malin, what this basically shows us is this cocoon stage, this larval stage. Nothing too major here, just kind of showing us, you know, the process under which people go whenever it is they're exposed to Extremis. But ultimately, Tony Stark actually dons a suit and then just kind of takes off. Now, what it is that Warren Ellis is doing here is focusing on this nature of Tony Stark in terms of what it is that he does. Now, we as readers are familiar with this, that Tony Stark will just don his Iron Man suit and then just sort of take off to clear his own mind. Now, he usually does this around Earth. In more recent stories, he actually left the Earth, which is when he joined the Guardians of the Galaxy for a time. But the fact remains here, in the middle of all this, his mind actually begins to transfer back to when he was younger and he first met Maya Hansen. Of course, the two of them basically sharing drinks and then, you know, engaging in some romantic actions and so on and so forth. But when Maya calls him up, she has his immediate and total attention. You know, of course, her response is, hey, look, you know, I need to talk to you about something. You know, we said that if we ever call one another, we would always answer, you know, that sort of thing. And so when Tony Stark responds to her call, what she basically does is bring him on, or at least inform him a little bit about something called the Extremis technology. Now, she's very, very cloak and dagger about it. She doesn't really say a whole lot to him about what it is that's going on. Instead, she basically just sort of admits, hey, look, you know, my boss Killian basically killed himself. We're trying to figure out why, trying to figure out what's going on. Of course, Tony Stark basically jacks Killian's hard drive, sends it off to one of his guys to be analyzed. And while that's going on, they actually transition over to a guy named Sal. This, of course, is a future version of Sal Crivelli over at Comic Pop. Now, what this guy Sal says, it looks like Sal, man. Like, look at him. Look at that guy. He looks like Sal in like 10 years. That's exactly how he will look. The goatee and the hair and all that stuff, it looks like it's gonna be Sal. But the fact remains here that this guy is actually a new introduction into the Iron Man landscape. And this, again, is one of those examples where Warren Ellis is just kind of folding over new things, you know, into the comics and and so on. The only information that we're really given is that this guy Sal seems to have been an instructor or a mentor of some kind for both Tony Stark and Maya Hansen, in the sense that he basically saw them as people who would herald the future. They would lead to the future and create better things. But the irony of all this is he really points at the failings of Tony Stark. He says, hey, look, your biggest problem is that you are, one, swept up in yourself, and two, you never really think outside the box. Now, of course, Sal doesn't know about the whole idea of Iron Man, of Tony Stark being Iron Man, but the other half of this that he draws is the concept that Maya Hansen will always play second fiddle to somebody else because her ambitions never lead her to wanting to be the number one person. This is combined with the fact that there's an inherent glass ceiling. She can only ever go so far. And so even if she is wanting to be the number one person, she'll just never really get to that point. And so again, this is really kind of hitting home with the idea that Tony Stark's never really lived up to his full potential, that Maya Hansen always had her own shortcomings. Again, kind of focusing on the nature of these characters, the tidbits and failings of these characters. But while all this is happening, we end up having Malin, who actually enters an FBI office, an FBI field office. And as he makes his way in there, we're given an example of what a person with Extremis can do, that they're given super strength, they're given super speed, that he's able to completely overpower these guys in the FBI. Their guns don't work, none of it matters, and he systematically takes out every last one of them. Now, of course, following this, he basically begins breathing fire. A lot of what you guys saw in Iron Man 3 is basically what you're seeing here. That's one of the elements that stayed intact, the nature of Extremis, what people can do who possess it, so on and so forth. He, of course, disables the elevators, allows the building to engulf in flames, and everybody inside is effectively killed. And so because of this, we end up having Tony Stark and Maya Hansen take off. And this is when Tony says, look, I need to know what I'm up against. I need to know about this Extremis stuff. Now, this is really, really cool. And the reason why I say that is because of the fact that an on-running theme in Marvel Comics is Captain America's Super Soldier Serum. Almost every single organization, nefarious group or something like that, has in some form or fashion tried to duplicate the Super Soldier Serum and just hasn't been successful. The entire existence of Weapons Plus was designed for the purpose of bringing in the Super Soldier Serum and then trying to duplicate it after it was used on Steve Rogers. The problem is that the secret of the serum died with Abraham Erskine, and the result is that no one's been able to replicate it perfectly ever since. This particular instance, this Extremis virus, is basically Future Farm's attempt to create their own super soldier program. The issue is that it was supposed to be contained, it was supposed to be maintained, only certain people were supposed to be able to use it. Somehow or another, this guy Malin managed to get his hands on it, he was inoculated with it, and it basically sent him reeling and going crazy and so on. The other half of this is that the Extremis virus basically improves on human physiology, which is to say, it rebuilds damaged organs, it restores damaged tissue. We're not really given any indication if it basically regrows severed limbs, but the implication seems to be that it can. It basically takes over, it hijacks the entirety of the body's genetic code, and it treats it like a computer program, and it just begins rebuilding lost components or restoring broken aspects and so on and so forth. And so the result of this is that Tony Stark himself dons the Iron Man suit and races off to deal with Malin. Now, of course, Tony Stark gets wrecked. He gets absolutely decimated. Between Malin's super strength, his super speed, so on and so forth, Stark just cannot keep up. I mean, it's just an absolute crushing blow. I mean, none of his attacks are working. His repulsors aren't working. His secondary assault systems aren't working. Nothing he has is pulling off anything whatsoever. And so the result is that Malin's able to basically overcome Tony Stark and then essentially bail out and complete his ultimate goal, which we'll find out what that is shortly. But with Tony Stark having been, battered and beaten to such an extreme degree, he's effectively bleeding to death inside of his own Iron Man suit. And that's really the danger of Stark's suit. In a lot of ways, Iron Man is like Luke Cage, right? I mean, Luke Cage is a guy that has indestructible skin, but if you drop him out of a plane from 20,000 feet in the air, sure, his skin won't break, but his brain will smash against his skull, his organs will probably liquefy on impact. I mean, you can destroy his body physically on the inside. It's just getting through his skin that's the problem. Tony Stark is the exact same way. He's got this hard exterior shell with the Iron Man suit, but underneath that is soft tissue. It's skin, it's organs, it's brain, so on and so forth. And so all it would take is a hard enough of an impact, and suddenly his arms and legs are broken inside of his own suit. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen that. I mean, there was a story of, Punisher: The End, when there's some kind of a glitch in the system, Iron Man's suit freezes and he can't get out, and his suit basically turns into a tomb. He's locked inside of his own suit for something like 5 days and then dies. It sucked. It was like, damn, that sucks. It was, it was a terrible way to go. It's like the most haunting thing too. Punisher's talking about it and he's like, like, they said he screamed for like 5 days, or what was it? He said it was like 5 days before the screaming stopped or something along those lines. I don't remember. But what a way to go. Just being locked in an iron tomb like that blows balls. But the fact remains, with Maya Hansen basically being contacted by Tony Stark and Tony Stark himself going directly to her facility, this plays out in a way that we basically expected, in the sense that with Tony Stark's body, with him experiencing, internal bleeding and so on and so forth, with the revelation that Malon's goal is to basically head to Washington, DC and attack the federal government, what this does is it basically allows Tony Stark to offer a little bit of discussion about his own suit, as well as what his intentions are. And what we end up finding out here is that Tony Stark himself, despite all his attempts when he started developing the Iron Man suits, because of the fact that this story basically treats everything before it as if it never really happened or never really existed, all we're really told here is that Tony Stark had basically made an Iron Man suit, he's improved on it over the years, but at the end of the day, it's still clunky, it's still large, it's not necessarily as streamlined as he would like it to be, and the suit reacts to his physical movements instead of what it is that he genuinely wants to do. And so his idea is to undergo the Extremis process and basically make the suit part and parcel to himself. And that's exactly what happens. Once he undergoes the process with the Extremis suit, once he's basically, granted the Extremis technology, what he does is he begins displaying his abilities to Maya Hansen. Now, of course, he's basically given himself these little ports, all along his skin, these little openings, and his suit basically emerges from the opening itself. And so where previously he would basically use his Iron Man suit, and he would be able to punch and kick and so on and so forth, now the suit responds to his thoughts. So the suit does what his mind wants him to do instead of what his arms and legs want him to do. Now, this is really kind of a small thing, but when you're fighting a guy that can move 300 miles an hour, that makes all the difference, because moving at the speed of thought is almost infinitely faster than moving at any kind of measure of super speed. The only exception to that is like the Flash. But the fact remains that with regards to Tony Stark, he wants his suit to function according to his own wishes and wants. Now, this also makes life a lot easier for him. And the reason why is because whenever it is that he wants to become Iron Man, he has to fly his suit directly to him. He has to like put it in a crate and then go to the crate and then open the crate and then put the pieces on one piece at a time, the legs and then the arms and then the chest and then the helmet. He's got to go through all these steps and all that kind of stuff. With Extremis, he can just recall his suit directly to him. He can basically put it on no matter where he is or what he's doing. And it certainly streamlines the entire process. And so what this does is it basically wraps around to the end of the Extremis story, in the sense that with Iron Man's new technology, his new abilities, moving at super speed, so on and so forth, it's almost like moving his arms or his legs. The suit is there, but it's almost like it's not there. It's almost like his body is just extremely durable, so the suit's an extension of his own mind. This is combined with the fact that he's basically a living computer now, and so he can tap into almost any computer network. He can access satellites, the whole 9 yards. He can do virtually anything he wants to. And so going against Malon, where Malon intended to attack Washington, DC, Tony Stark's able to stop him and able to basically outmaneuver him in every single way. It's just kind of funny to see it all unfold, because ultimately, Malon really doesn't have much of a chance here. Now, of course, what this does is basically end in Malon's defeat, but it requires Tony Stark to kill him. And that's really what the idea was going on here, where Malon simply just will not step back, where Malon simply will not walk away. Tony Stark has no choice but to kill him. Now, this throws into sharp relief the nature of Malon. He's not a guy who's just attacking arbitrarily with no real, wants or desires. He has motivation. He's a guy who's rooted in the idea that his parents were killed by the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Now, of course, they were killed because of the fact that they were basically, engaging in weapons dealing and arms dealing, so on and so forth. But it was bringing in this concept of, the state versus individual rights. And it was really kind of cool to see it play out. Really kind of what was going on here was very indicative of Timothy McVeigh and Waco, Texas and stuff like that. A little bit of a history lesson for those of you guys who don't know. Waco, Texas happened because a UPS driver accidentally dropped a package before he got it to the building and discovered that there were firearms inside. And so he reported it to the local police. They reported to the FBI. The FBI reported to the ATF. Since the ATF are the ones that deal with firearms, this resulted in the ATF basically launching an investigation into the Branch Davidians, which was run by David Koresh. Ultimately, it turned out that David Koresh was engaging in polygamous marriage with underage girls. The FBI and the ATF basically had a standoff for something like 50 or 70 days or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Eventually, the FBI raided the place, and 70-something Branch Davidian men, women, and children were killed as a result of fires that were set or firefights, whatever the case may be. Now, Timothy McVeigh was watching all the events unfold and felt like the government was overstepping its bounds. And so as a result, he wanted to start a revolution within the United States, and did so by blowing up half of the Oklahoma City building. That's why that happened. This is kind of a reflection of that, in the sense that it's a guy who's come to believe that the US government is vastly vastly overstepping its bounds. Now, this is also one of those things where it's just conveniently ignoring everything else, like his parents were dealing drugs and his parents were involved in illegal assault rifle distributing. You know, they were engaged in a litany of illicit acts, none of which should have involved a child in any form or fashion. And so again, it's really one of those things where it's just kind of selecting what memories are chosen and what memories aren't, and just kind of like, well, you know, the facts are too inconvenient and that sort of thing. But ultimately, you know, his standing gets the better of it. And as a result, Tony Stark's forced with no other option than to basically use the unibeam from his chest to blow a hole through Malin and then destroy his head using his own repulsors. And so that's really it. I mean, that's really all it comes down to. Now, while all that was happening, with Tony Stark being able to move as fast as he is, with his mind being a living computer, tapping into satellites and all different kinds of things, there was one piece of information that Maya Hansen dropped that basically revealed that she was involved in this entire scheme. When Tony Stark and Maya went to go access the Extremis vault, she said, the vault needs 2 keys. One belonged to Killian, the other belonged to me. And this is when Tony Stark realizes that the entirety of the Extremis virus was released, not just by Killian, but by Hansen herself. And the explanation that she offers is their job was to basically develop the Extremis virus, or develop something that could be used, you know, for medical technology, different things like that. But the issue was that the US government wanted to use it for nefarious purposes. When they told the US government they're not going to weaponize Extremis, the US government pulled their funding. And so the only way for Maya Hansen and Killian to basically keep Future Farm working was to sell off Extremis to the highest bidder, which is what they did, resulting in Malin getting the Extremis virus and then everything taking place in this story. So again, it's really kind of a cool idea. It's a really, really cool set of events, and it's definitely one of my favorite stories from the entirety of the Iron Man run. But the other half of this story's significance and why it's so important is because of the fact that this sets the stage for virtually everything that comes after. And so if, for example, you sat down and you wanted to read Iron Man before the events of Secret Wars, you start with Extremis and work your way forward, and that's all you need to do. You can read Civil War if you want to, you don't really have to, but you can just kind of go with this and then just work your way forward with the Iron Man titles, and that's really it. You don't need to read anything before this came out. I mean, you can read like Demon in a Bottle, or you can read Armor Wars or something like that, but those are by no means necessary for understanding anything that comes after Iron Man Extremis. But with that being said, guys, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.